going to do that and see how that works. So welcome everybody to Just Talking with Ayesha, Dami, Gwenda, and myself.
Love that.
I love the
The
shimmy.
lovely Gwenda Lambert.
Thank you. So tonight we're going to do, as you know, first of all, welcome back. I hope everybody enjoyed their long weekend. I know that we really liked the rest, and it's allowed us to regroup and really focus on how we want to take this moving forward. So we've decided that because we had Victoria on the last time, that we would take these next two sessions to have each of us. So Aisha's going to ask me questions. Next week is going to be myself the other way around, to find out how we got to where we are today and what kind of therapeutic journey that we've been on. And then the last week of April is going to be Victoria joining us again, and she is going to chat with us about how we find a good therapist. So we're hoping really that over the next 3 shows that it gives you some really good insight into how the process goes, because it's not easy, right? It's not easy. You have to find somebody. It's like an interviewing process, but it's not just interviewing. I feel it's also a certain part on your journey gets you, because seriously, we can't just come to terms with everything all at once, especially if there's layers. And I know that that's the situation in my case. So it may be many different types of people as we go along. So as you know, the format that we have is we just talk. We just have a conversation and we see what comes up. So I'm going to now pass it off to Ayesha, and I'm a little excited and nervous. No, I'm just kidding. So Ayesha, go for it.
Yes, our guest tonight is the lovely and talented Gwenda Lambert, life coach, entrepreneur, all around wonderful, wonderful person. So Gwenda, I know you're going to talk to us today about I'm really talking like a radio host, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You sound like you should be, and how we are. I get that. Yeah.
Right back.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, so let me come back into the moment with you. So therapy is not an easy decision for people to undertake. It's something that comes after usually some kind of an event or some kind of an incident that really pushes you to say, okay, I can't do this by myself. Whatever you're comfortable sharing, and please feel free to share only that. And you don't have to as well. But at what point were you motivated to start looking for a therapy alternative to how you were dealing with things?
You know what? And this is really interesting, because I am going to start with my first experience with therapy was actually, as you know, my dad was a borderline personality disorder, manic depressive. That's what he was, identified as before. And through that process, we did a family therapy session, I think 1, maybe 2. So that was when I was a teenager, but the wheels were completely falling off of everybody. So it was a completely, I just think of trying to be the therapist in that room, because not only did you have my parents' dynamic, you had the whole family dynamic that we had. So that was the first time it was in therapy, and that really wasn't successful. When I was in my 20s, and this is really the way that I look at it, and I really think that we should have registered therapy funds, because 0 to 20 stuff happens. And even the most well-intentioned parents can still leave marks, right? And it doesn't even have to be your parents. It could be from a teacher. It could be from it could be from any number of things. That's what life is. Life is really about how we get to know ourselves, how we process, and how we deal. So by the time I left home, which again wasn't a nice, here you go. It was okay, you need to get out. And in my 20s, I was really starting, the anger comes up, right? Because at the beginning, first you decompress. So, and this really, it was a domestic violence situation. And I want to be able to point out that if you get more stressed out by the thought of going into your home when you get home, that's domestic violence. So, or at least that's my interpretation. It can be sibling on sibling, parent on child, parent on parent. Uh, and so the thing is, though, that's all you know, that's normal. Normal. So, things when I left home, which is this is like if you ask me, step one is really identifying that you're in a place that's not healthy, no matter what age. First thing to do is get out of that if you possibly can. Find an advocate, find somebody that can help you do that. And I did. I left home and I was on student welfare so I could finish my school. And I would walk to school because I would run out of money. Anyways, so first you have this excitement because I was on my own. And then I started getting really, really angry. And then I started getting not even flashbacks. So I started my corporate job and they had an EAP program. So I called the EAP and I said, well, here's my little Cole's Notes version of my life so far. And here's the potential marks, is what I'll call it. Like, here's my dad, here's the history. And there was many different layers. And this poor woman, I thought she was going to start crying. And the great thing about therapists or people that are in those roles, and let's also point out that this was 30 years ago, right? I was 27. So, or 26. But this person put her hand on my knee and she said, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And it's like, no, if I was okay, I wouldn't be here. Like, and so, unfortunately, I took that to say, well, you're on your own. So that was my first experience, and that lasted an hour. And I was just trying to say, oh, well, what it is, because let me also point out here that there's a lot of times when people go to therapy, and it's like, what is it that you're trying to understand about yourself? What kind of coping skills do you have? And how can they help you almost, get from here to here? Well, in some cases where there's multiple traumas, as they're called, it's like a minefield. You don't know which to unpack first.
Mhm.
So now it's easier to find therapists that actually specialize in even post-traumatic stress. That wasn't even a thing back then. And you add on the other part that my dad did have mental health history. So I was like, oh my God, maybe I'm crazy like him. So part of me didn't want to do that because it's like, well, what if you find out you're crazy? And then the other part is like, well, if I find out I'm crazy, then I'll figure it out. Even using that word crazy is just wrong. So that was my first experience. And yeah, it wasn't, the good part is that part is that I did a lot of things instinctively. I got more into physical activity. So in a way, I think I was trying to work out the anger. I'd walk around bare feet all the time. Everybody called me a hippie, but part of that was earthing or grounding. So there's a lot of things that I was doing instinctively that if anything, when I would read one of those self-help books or something that was something that was one of these learning books for other people, I'm like going, oh, that's actually a thing. And so that helped me sort of feel a bit better. It's like, oh, I'm just sort of figuring it out on my own. So
Yeah, that's amazing. I just want to acknowledge a few things that you said there. First of all, you talked about how domestic violence takes different forms. And I think that's really important for people to understand because sometimes we don't think of ourselves as being exposed to violence or victims of violence because it doesn't look a particular way or a way that we have been socialized to think that it should look. And it takes a little bit of understanding and some more nuance to really pick up on the fact that violence can occur in many different forms. And it can occur between different members of the family. You talked about people in the immediate family. It can also happen with people in the extended family. It can happen with neighbors. It can happen with other people that you trust that are in positions of authority. So being exposed to violence doesn't look a particular way. And like you say, if going into any situation makes you feel unsafe, then you want to consider that there is potentially an element of violence involved there. So I think that's really important that you raise that. So thank you. You also talked about experiencing therapy in two different ways. You did it with your family, first of all, and all the dynamics that are going on there, right? And in that environment, sometimes it is difficult to be seen or be heard with other people's stuff going on around you. So if that's your first experience with therapy, you might have thought, oh, you know what, this is not going to work for me because, you know, no one is paying attention to me. They're just trying to kind of put out the fires as they see them, right? And then you had an experience with someone in therapy where they gave you an answer that seemed to be dismissive, and so you didn't think that you had any other options, right, with them. So that both of those things can be barriers to looking for therapy outside of there. Now, you talked about allowing yourself to really dig into, along with the self-help books you were reading, dig into what instinctively felt right to you. And I think that's a big piece of how we are hoping to support people in whatever therapy they choose to go through, is that it needs to be something that fits with you. And it doesn't mean that you trade one thing for another. If intuitively something feels good to you and makes you feel better and helps you move through things, then you don't just cut that off because you think you need to follow the experts. So after those two experiences, when did you come back to therapy again?
Okay. So that would have been in my 20s. And unfortunately, because of my lovely little post-traumatic stress, I don't necessarily have like a specific timeline because parts of my brain just decides that I don't need to remember certain things. Um, but I also have to put in this when you're dealing with complex PTSD, and again, this book that I recently read, Complex PTSD by Peter Walker, has, oh my God, it's opened up my eyes. Um, when you come to things like that, I found that after that, I started with my parents. I started directly with my primary relationships. And I think that's because they're the ones that really demand the most. But like part of it was like coming to terms with the fact that my father had mental health issues. Excuse me. And I had to learn to love him where he was, or not. I mean, that's what I chose to do. So I didn't see him for many years, and then I searched him out. So I started developing. Now, a relationship is whatever it is. It's not always perfect. It doesn't mean that you're all lovey but what it was I started with that relationship because my relationship with my father, one of the main things that was like a huge aha moment when I was like in my 40s and I was actually going through therapy, uh, was the fact that he had given us this take care of your mother, take care of people belief that was ingrained, that it was in the way I interpreted it, that was my responsibility to take care of everybody else. So it wasn't to take care of myself. So having that belief firmly ingrained and having so many Samsonites to unpack, a lot of it was, again, my own stuff. So the next like professional therapy I did was, I was in a relationship. And so I think I was about 36. So I was 36. So it was easily a decade. And this happened to be because I knew somebody that was, a master's in therapy. So I went to her, and that's when I really got into a therapeutic, like, here's an event. I need to be able to deal with this event. and that was, I was with this guy, and I knew that the reason I chose him was because of all these other undealt with issues. And that's really, I mean, I think the best gift you give to yourself if you have any kind of layered background is to really be able to just keep digging in and digging in. So I had done all this digging in with my dad. So I knew what the issues, I was getting to understand what the issues were with my dad. But the awareness when I turned to this guy and looked and said, "You're my like mom, my dad, you know, boom, 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 all in one." And he knew enough to go, "Well, that's not a nice thing to say." But for me, it was like, oh my God, like this is the building. So this, it's the old saying that, you know, the universe sends you a little rock, you know, you don't get it, sends a bigger rock. You don't get it, they send a brick. You don't get it, they drop the house on you. The CN Tower had fallen on my head with that sucker.
Wow.
Um, so that was my second time, and that was more successful because I had actually been able to develop a bond with her, and uh, and you know the great thing, uh, being aware of what's going on and being able to connect the dots is the biggest gift that you can give your patient. And so she did really well on asking me key questions and then leaving me to figure it out. So I've also had therapists more recently that get upset that they can't be the whole toolbox, that they can't be, you know, that they can't be the toolbox. But let's not jump ahead. So that was my first positive experience with therapy. But again, a lot of times a therapeutic relationship, or my impression at that point, is that they're trying to help you get through a certain thing, which she did. And I ended up, you know, I remember saying, you know, if I really go with what I feel, this relationship's going to be over. And that's exactly what happened.
Mhm.
So that was a positive relationship because I felt like somebody was on my side, right? I felt like somebody was there for me, helping me. So that was the next time. So that would have been 10 years later. Um, and again, it didn't go on because, you know, it's really funny when you have different layers going on in your head or belief systems. You know, that's one thing that, you know, all these things that they sell their programs. Well, we're going to get to your underlying beliefs. Well, sometimes you need to get some out of the way. And then, like a Pez dispenser, the next batch comes up. Like, first of all, it's like, okay, let's learn to love my dad where he is. Let's learn to, you know, understand that he's never going to be that Hallmark dad. And okay, so what are you going to do about that? And so once I came to terms with that, it's like, okay, phew. And then you had the man in your life that was a replicant of all the rest of this stuff. And once he's out of the way, then it's like, okay, I need to unpack that again some more.
Right.
So that was my next part.
So let me ask you, between that age of 26 and 36, what tools did you use to get through that period before you knew, okay, now I need to go ahead and go back to therapy? So what was it that you, because you said you were able to do a lot of work in that interim period where you were able to meet your father where he was, love him where he was. How were you able to get to that point without therapy?
And actually, coming to think of it, I don't think it was that time. I think it was after that time that I started having that kind of process. I don't think I did anything. I think there was a lot of drinking, like a lot of
Okay.
drinking.
Yep.
Um,
Coping.
a lot of, oh yeah. And then the good thing is getting into physical activity again, which was always, that too can be an addiction. So let me just point out as well. I mean, I don't know how much I weighed, but I was very thin. I had like 12% body fat, which is not healthy for a woman. But I was also, I knew that um I knew that I was really, I had a lot of anger, and then my hormones were off. What I know now, oh my God. So I don't think I did anything actually. And to come to think of it, yeah, so it would have been drinking. And thank God, I just want to point out those made for TV movies. I never put anything in my arm, but God knows I put a lot of stuff in my mouth, like drugs, alcohol, things like that. Um, and so at one point it was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to, I don't want to, but luckily in your 20s, that's being a party person, right? Oh, you're fun to have at parties. And yeah. So in my 30s, it was really that relationship because, I thought I was going to get married and, have that life. And that's never a life I imagined having.
Right.
And then I went to work overseas. So, I went to work in the islands. So I was on my own, but not really on my own because I had a boyfriend that was in Canada. So I didn't do like, I think a lot of it, it's really funny that because I'm an intuitive, I would get dreams all the time. That's how I get my messages. But I was very much aware that those were messages and that I needed to do something with them or I wouldn't be dreaming about them.
Right.
So I would not necessarily journal, but I would ponder. And one of the things I loved when I was living in the islands, and this is sort of my therapy, was I learned to scuba dive. So I would go snorkeling as often as possible. I mean, this one time in the Bahamas, it was like, a Saturday, whatever, I would go and pretend I was a tourist. And I had this angelfish and these two skipping jacks that like swam with me for 45 minutes. And it was like they were hanging out and, anyways. So it was things like that. It was always nature. It was always water, lots of water. So oceans always had something to do with it. But yeah, I didn't have any kind of therapy and not even good books because really, other than the Wayne Dyers and things like that, there weren't books out there that were, the knowledge wasn't there that there is now on certain aspects. We didn't talk about, and let's also separate that I had family situation and then I also had the inappropriate sexual attention outside of the family. Well, extended family and also outside of the family. So there's a whole bunch of different levels of trauma in there that I wasn't even acknowledging. So I would say I wasn't doing much.
Okay. But I think what you've shared with us, again, I want to, first of all, acknowledge and thank you for your courage in sharing around addictions and around what your experience was, because that's very courageous of you to share that in this space that we're sharing with other people. And so thank you for that. I think that, not to be dismissive of addictive behaviors, but we do what we do to survive. We do what we do to cope. And then we realize that this is no longer what we want to do to cope, that there are different ways to go about coping. And that awareness starts to come up. And for you as an intuitive, as you were going through life, what you had done at the beginning was find intuitive ways to soothe and to comfort and to take care of yourself by earthing, by going out in nature, by doing physical activities, by what was coming up in your dreams, scuba diving, so on and so forth. So it was really tapping into what was happening inside of you and really letting yourself be led by that. And that's one way that, in addition to therapy, that anyone would want to look at creating a whole life, coming back to your whole self, right? Because that's not easy to do. Now, when you're talking about multiple issues of trauma, so you talked about PTSD, you talked about abuse, when you went back to therapy the next time, were you looking to focus on one area or another, or was there a particular reason or a particular something that you were feeling that you were like, I need to deal with this?
Well, then the next time was when I met this beautiful man who happened to be 6'6" and 265 pounds. And so that would have been, I was around 40. Um, and this guy The second I was with him, it was just really weird. It was one of those things. We just clicked and it was lovely. He was just a gentle giant. But because believe me, even the aspect of the post-traumatic stress, the reason that that door opened was a number of events that were just synchronistic. And I believe it was due to an intention that I was setting when I was paddling, because when I was paddling, I had to be weighed and, we had to bench press and bench row half of our body weight. Well, I was one of the biggest girls on the team. So that was like usually 35 pounds. Like that's a lot of weight, or 60 pounds, 65 pounds, right? Uh, anyways, so this guy, he picked me up and walked with me, and it was so tender and so beautiful. And that's the night I started having the flashbacks to my rape, my sexual assault. And that was very specific. And oh my God, the dreams during that time. Never mind, it's like, oh, hello, you lovely man. I have to tell you that this loving gesture that you made towards me triggered all these things. Um, and so he was wonderful. Again, it's really interesting because we had just this. Unfortunately, one of the things that came out of that was my throat. I couldn't talk. I literally felt tightness in my throat. And this is the importance of feeling what's going on in your body. And so that was when I went and I looked for somebody specific to sexual assault, because it was really clear and really evident that it was to this night when I was 15. And before this, I just want to also throw in that my shoulder was having really weird stuff. I was paddling all the time, but it was like this arm was not working. It felt like it was unplugged. And so it was really interesting because um, this would come out of this as well, out of this awakening, shall we say. So that's when I looked for somebody specific to sexual assault. And I remember her giving me this sheet asking me about disassociation. And I was like, well, why are we talking about disassociation? And it's like, and the funny thing is, again, getting back to this complex PTSD book by Peter Walker, with finally reading this, I'm talking in the last month, it's like, oh, it's an emotional flashback. Oh my God, that's what I was feeling. When I was going through all this stuff, these books weren't even printed. There wasn't even this kind of information known about what's called the somatic approach. So I went and I found a master of social work who she did things like EMDR, but unfortunately, it costs like $200 a session. And even with insurance, I had $500 coverage. Well, that's 2 sessions. So I went to her for two or three sessions. And it was like, oh, okay, this is a flashback. Oh, okay. Well, why the disassociation? Now, of course, you're not going to come out and go, well, because it sounds like you have post-traumatic stress. You can't just come out and jump people with that, because that can be overwhelming. And thankfully, all the other things that I've been doing, like I do interpret dreams. I've interpreted my dreams because that's how I get my messages. So I've been doing that since I was a teenager or younger, and just say, okay, what are you trying to tell me? So I went to her for a while. And again, I used my paddling. My paddling was, I would take it out on the water. I would take it out on my runs. I did half marathons. I rode my motorcycle up to who knows where. That was therapy. And so that was the next time. What happened after that is my dad then he was sick and then passed away. So that was now 2013 or 2012. And then there was a whole bunch of family stuff that just escalated. So it was really interesting, because it's like this beautiful man picked me up, which really, I think, had me feel safe in a way that nobody else almost on the planet could pick up me at 165 solid pounds and walk around like it's nothing. And so that, and then the other stress, and then stuff started happening at work. And then it was like all bets were off. So it would have been another, until I got the post-traumatic. So it would have been, so 2010, I would have gone to her the first time. 2012, 2013 is when I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. So the time in between there was my body just literally going, I can't do this for you anymore. You got to deal with it. So, and that's when the big one hit. And that was like, okay, man, now I'm a mess. So I went back to the same woman. And here's where the crap, I really want anybody that's in any kind of insurance or any kind of, you've got to be able to know, because you've got to advocate for yourself. And thank God I know what I know and I think the way that I think. But it was like, I'm in the middle of having this breakout. I felt like I was losing my mind. And, you've got assurance adjusters saying, well, you can't be diagnosed. Or even this woman, she's a master of social work, but she can't diagnose. So you have to get a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So it's like, oh my God, the last thing I need to do right now is go and find somebody else. How do I, like, help me? Somebody help me. I'm just trying to hold on for dear life. So, needless to say, getting back to the therapeutic stuff, because of what I had done many years ago when I was 37, and the fact that I knew that physical stuff was very important. Whatever I talked out, I would get a massage either the next day. So when it came to the post-traumatic stress part, I would go to therapy twice a week. And then right after that, I would have massage or an osteopath. The osteopath would go through all your fascia, which is almost like a big, huge memory in your body. And then I would go to restorative yoga, which probably saved my life for, oh my God, 4 days a week, sometimes 5 or 6. And that was all I could do just to hold on through all that. So the most important thing, and thank God I knew that before this big crap hitting the fan time, because that allowed me to go, okay. So I had my RMT, who is spiritually based, my yoga instructor, spiritually based, obviously, my my therapist. So everybody was basically came from a holistic standpoint. And I finally found a naturopath that would really change things up as well. So I had a whole team. You need a whole team because you're healing. The other part that I want to put out here, especially with post-traumatic stress, is that it really, there's the flight or fight part. My flight part was on full. Like I was totally hyper vigilant for literally years. And you have to really take the patience to be able to work on your body to say, okay, we need you to calm, we need you to center. We were doing what's the EMDR? It's not EMDR. Is it EMDR? Descent.
You talking about the tapping?
No, EMDR is the
Oh, it's the eye movement. Yes.
desensitization.
Yes,
So
that's right.
that was fabulous because especially when it comes to memories, in my case, memories that 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 are stuck or that haven't been acknowledged or opened, that really helps you, almost like a jack in the box. So that was really helpful. But it's really funny because when you're not ready to deal with something, your body will also tell you. And so there was EMDR that was really helpful. Tapping is really wonderful if other people are doing it for you, I find, because I think out of anything that you're doing, this is really about letting other people do the driving. So you don't have to think about what's going on. You just have to emote or become aware of. So it's not like, okay, I'm going to think right now of what exactly I'm going to say. You're just following somebody who's already listened to your words and they're giving them back to you. in a way that's really therapeutic and opening. Um, okay, I'll just stop there because like, it's like one thing goes into another. So
Okay. No, that's great. I think you've given people a lot to kind of think about and consider in the context of excuse me, of therapy. Anyone who doesn't know the term RMT, that stands for registered massage therapist as well. You talked about having people on your team that are in different modalities, and you also talked about the limitations of insurance and benefits and covering that. What can you share with people who may not have the funds or the means to be able to access multiple people and multiple modalities and feel like they still are able to somehow get at least some of the help that they need?
So I will tell you that for a while there, like for about 5 years, I did qualify for the disability tax credit. That's something, unfortunately, there's some, y- there's ambulance chasers out there all over the place, but this really helped me. Um, it helped me from a financial aspect. So,
That's something that people can access if they don't have benefits?
they can access, absolutely. So you'll have to get your doctor to approve it for you. And what that does is really it reduces the amount of taxes that you have to pay. So, because what I did was I had that tax credit, and we have RSPs for reasons, and I literally delved right into that. Um, but here's one thing I will say right off the bat, because um, when I ended up, I stuck to my guns when it came to like, I can't go back to work. I'm not prepared to do that. My brain isn't working. And I remember it was really interesting because people are like, oh, are you finding this on the internet? It's like, I'm not making this stuff up, but you're not helping me. I know I'm not good. I know I'm not in a good place. So I'm going to keep looking. So hopefully you have insurance. There is, as Victoria pointed out last week, a holistic psychotherapist is now one of those amounts. So again, last time I had it's $500. That doesn't do a lot for a number of sessions. But there are places that you can go to. Like for instance, if you've been through any kind of like adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, which is CSA, you can go to a place called the Gatehouse. The Gatehouse, and I'll put these tags in here. The Gatehouse is renowned across Canada. It's, again, Gabor Mate, who's a head trauma guy. They have a program there that you can take it now, even if you're on the other side of therapy. But the thing is that you need to be able to get into these circles and at least get into groups, because I know that I wrote about this in my chapter called Now I Sing Again. And I wrote about what it is, the key things that I would do. First of all, can't speak enough about um, restorative yoga, and unfortunately we can't do it now because we can't be with each other, but that's coming to an end soon. But restorative yoga was huge. Restorative yoga, not when you're doing anything, but when somebody is moving you into position, because it's basically allowing your body to learn how to, your nervous system to learn how to um, relax. There's embodiment courses now, which is really important to be able to, if you disassociate, you want to be able to stay grounded in your body, because a lot of what disassociation is when we can't cope with what's going on at the time. So we basically leave our body. And so that's something. Again, you can get resources a lot of times if it is sexual assault, domestic violence. They're getting more and more to the point where there are resources that can help you. So I'll post some of those. I don't know, like, again, I know of somebody, a yoga instructor. There's trauma informed everything right now, and there's a lot of those people because they have been through where you are now, especially if you're in crisis. ask everybody for help. And it may be really hard for you to do, but ask anybody and everybody for help. And I know that was the hardest thing for me to do. That was the first time I learned that I didn't ask people for help. You know, that was really bizarre when the therapist said, well, of course you deserve to be supported. And I was like, what? It's like she might as well have been speaking alien to me, right? And that was just like, what do you mean people help you? And now it's like I have wonderful friends like you and people that support me. Some of the small things that I would say is like, especially in yoga, if you're in any kind of crisis, don't do any kind of heart opening. Like, and I've had conversations with people about this. It's like, well, this allows you to let it out. But here's the thing, yourself. If that's one thing, get pillows, cover yourself with pillows when you sleep, do whatever you need to allow your body to feel safe, because once your body feels safe, then you'll be able to get into it and then you'll be able to heal. So how can you get these? And the one thing I'll say about, as I was on short or long-term disability, they gave me 5 different caseworkers. And that was really hard because every single time I had to tell my story. And it's like, there's nothing good about it. Especially if you have post-traumatic stress, unless you are doing it for a therapeutic reason, decline to tell your story. If you're just doing it to bring somebody else up to speed because they can't read the file, do your best not to do that, because every single time it would just set me back. And I think this is the last part that I would say in hindsight now, because I ended up getting assessed by this guy who is like one of the heads of trauma at CAMH. And he spoke about in my report that there's probably stuff that I was dismissing. And I look at it now and it's like, yeah, I didn't even know half of what I was doing was a protection, that it was some sort of protection in the way my brain was processing. So how I would look at something was radically different from the therapeutic aspect of that.
Mhm.
I hope that makes sense. Like, I would never say that I would go out and say, oh, I want to kill myself or anything like that, not meaning to be triggering. But I would say, I just want this to stop. In my head, it's like, I've had enough. And that is a form of it. It's a passive form, but it's like, until I literally listened to this book, like in the last month, it's like, oh, wow, I would have come at that whole assessment a whole lot different, because instead it was like, it's like I was trying to be like, oh yeah, I'm okay, I got this. And it's like, I plainly didn't. But I also had not had anybody from a real therapeutic standpoint, because this is one thing I have to say. The MSW that I was dealing with, one day she says to me, well, sometimes life isn't fair. And that was it. It's like, I'm looking for somebody that can be my partner in this. I'm not looking for somebody that's trying to, life was not fair 1,000 years ago. We're way past that, and so it's really important to make sure that the person that you deal with in any kind of therapy can, I don't know, and it sounds bad, but go toe to toe. It's like, I don't mean toe to toe like a violent, like a fight. I mean, like, they have to be able to hold you where you are, Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is they need to keep you safe.
Yeah, and they have to be able to, yeah, and it's like, this isn't about being fair.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, how, I don't know. I don't know. And it's hard because there's not a lot of, there's more somatic practitioners now, but it's really hard to get into trauma and help somebody heal from trauma, because you have to allow them a safe enough space to be able to go back and process or unpack that stuff and know that they're safe, right? So, and that's
There's
not
a
easy.
absolutely, yeah. There's so much to say about what you've said. I think that when we look at, I think for me, one of the biggest things that's coming up as you're talking about this is access to resources, is how many people don't have access to resources. And it may be something even more fundamental than just having a job that gives you benefits. It could be, our place as women in society has always been to be caregivers to other people, those people who have other people depending on them, whether they're parents, whether they're children. They always try and keep it together so that everybody else can be together. And so it makes it difficult to actually, even on your personal level, think that, okay, I need to do this for myself, because if I don't, then I'm going to have some kind of a break, and it may not be something that's going to be good for me or for my family, right? I think the other thing about resources you mentioned, one of the resources you were talking about, child survivors of childhood sexual abuse. That's an agency that, if you're in Toronto, in Ontario, there is the Barbara Schleifer Clinic in Toronto, which is a great resource for anyone who's dealt with sexual assault. They don't just do therapy, but they also provide legal assistance. They also provide other kinds of support if you need to get out of a situation. They're a great resource. There's the Toronto Rape Crisis Center that can also be called. There's a number of different resources, hotlines. If you're a child or you're a teenager, a young person, anyone under 26, you can call the Kids Help Phone. So there's several free resources for you to use at any given time. And a lot of those, not the Schleifer Clinic, and I'm not sure about the survivors of childhood sexual abuse, but certainly Kids Help Phone and the Rape Crisis Center are 24 hours. So you can give them a call anytime. I think it's really important also that you raise the issue of self-harm. If any of our viewers are experiencing this, if you see this in anyone, that is the time to reach out and get help, to contact anyone that you can support you through this, because you're valuable, you're needed, you have a space on this earth, and we want you to be here with us. So please do keep an eye out for that as well, because that's very, very, very important. So Gwenda, just to finish off then, first of all, I just again want to acknowledge and thank you for sharing your journey with us. Gwenda Lambert, life coach, entrepreneur, public speaker, self-defense trainer, woman of many talents, and healer and light worker, all those things that you are. You've come a long, long way. And so thank you for sharing that. Let's close it off, and maybe you can tell us one of the greatest benefits that you've received through therapy that you think has really kind of helped you through different phases of your life.
This flesh suit is a gift. It can protect you. But it's also, God, that's a really good question. Like, it's really funny now when I talk to people, and the first thing they say, you seem really grounded. It's like, yeah, it took me like 6 years to want to stay in my body. So it would be, the main thing is that you've already survived whatever it is. You've already survived. First thing, get to safety, and be compassionate with yourself. And this is probably the most important, because this is just one little thing. I went on antidepressants. I get stoned on Tylenol, 2 days of antidepressants, and I had to call an ambulance for myself because my body doesn't take to that kind of stuff. So luckily I had to do things naturally. So I didn't want to go out on the stretcher because I didn't want my neighbors to see and be concerned about me. And it's like, no, honey, me is what matters, not all what they think. So, put yourself first, put your mask on first. And because until you believe that you're worthy of that, and that can take years. Just keep going at it, and just learn to love yourself. And it's the best gift. It allows you to be fully present for everybody else. I didn't realize that I just talked so much, but Yeah, it's been an interesting ride, and I'm so glad to be here, right? Where I learn to ask for help. And that's it. Probably start off small, learn to, if you cannot pick up the phone and call somebody, anybody, including one of us, right? Like seriously, if you know either of us, reach out.
Reach out.
We've been there,
Please do.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, reach out.
Yeah,
Just learn to ask for help, and
yeah,
people will help.
yeah,
And one last thing would be letting people bear witness to your story. So look for people who have been where you have, who can, or really compassionate, safe friends who will allow you to tell your story. Because until you get it out live, out of your head, out of your heart, then you can't deal with anything until we make it real, and honor yourself enough to know that you're worth it, and we love you.
yeah, we do. 100%. Yeah. Thank you.
Woo! This is a long one today, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing all that you did, for your courage, for your honesty, and for the desire to share it in service of other people. Thank you.
And next week we're going to be doing Ayesha, and again we've had completely opposite experiences on this, right? So I think again that's why we just talk about stuff, because we bring different experiences to the table, right? And
Yeah,
there's a
that's
whole
right.
bunch of experiences out there, and that would be the other thing. Out of your head, out of your heart, whatever your body holds, when the body says no, the body says no. It's all, you're storing it all, and you're storing, you have it all stored, so you have to work it out here somewhere as well.
Yeah,
Massage, body work.
yeah, yeah. And that might be scary for people who have experienced any kind of physical or sexual violence.
Yeah.
So it's something that you work towards, and you work towards it in a way that you always feel safe. You always feel like you're in control of everything, and that you do it in a time frame and in a modality that actually makes sense for you and works for you.
And trauma informed. There's so many
Yeah,
people are trauma informed, because we know I'm talking, there's a lot of people out there that have been where you have, and now they're here to help you. So
yeah,
no matter what stage you are in your healing journey, we all need to know that there's an ear if we need to talk, right?
yeah. That's it
And
exactly.
I guess the last thing I would say is, if you are not in an emotionally capable place to be able to hear somebody's story, please advise them to go anywhere else, like somewhere else. But encourage them. As you said, Kids Help phone line. One of the reasons I started teaching self-defense as well, right, is the number of girls at 15 in my class that would come up, that have already experienced that kind of trauma.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's
Yeah,
like, promise me you'll go and talk to somebody. Just
yeah,
start.
exactly. Yeah, you got to start somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is a long show tonight.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you for
you.
your wonderful interview and your translation services, as always. Taking my
Oh, all good. Thank you for sharing your amazing story. It's very inspiring, and I hope that it touches people and supports them in their own paths, wherever they're going, whatever mode they choose to um, find wellness in their life, create wellness in their lives. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so
Okay.
much. All
We'll
right.
see you next week.
Yes.
We'll all embrace Aisha's journey.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I look forward to sharing, and I hope it helps as well. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you
All right.
next week.
See you next week.